Yes, we have just enjoyed on a Monday night, a rare treat. Fenerbahce won, Galatasaray won. It felt as if Galatasaray had it in the bag for a long time, thanks to Leroy Sané's goal and a very poised performance. But Jhon Durán, he just makes crazy stuff happen. And after coming on, strolling around, picking his nose for a bit, he scores a late equaliser to make sure, Lars, that Fenerbahce are still the only unbeaten team in the Turkish Super League and keep the gap at the top to 1 point. I mean, if we're talking about what's good for the Super League, Durán's goal definitely was good for the Super League, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And the early indications are that maybe this isn't a season where Galatasaray completely runs away with the title and are completely unassailable. It's great that they're just 1 point ahead of Fener and just 2 points ahead of Trabzonspor, by the way, after 14 games. So I think Fenerbahce did everyone a favour. Jhon Durán did everyone a favour. I mean, this seems like a good idea for me to get my mandatory dig at José Mourinho in and see that it's good to see that having the special one having moved on, the team is much better for it. That is exactly what one would expect. And really, my big takeaway is, as always with these occasions, the atmosphere is so incredible. It reminds me of when we went there, when the atmosphere was actually a little bit more subdued because they were in sort of grumpy mode because of Mourinho. But I look at Jhon Durán scoring that goal, and the goal is not a masterpiece. It's a cross into the area that he manages to get ahead on, but just the celebrations it triggered, and you can see him running towards the fans, and you can see him just absolutely loving it, and you realize like what a great move it is for him personally. I think to, instead of sort of faffing about in Saudi Arabia, he's now playing in this incredible cauldron in front of these fans. Okay, he has actually not scored as many goals so far that we expect, but he hasn't actually been able to play that many games. I think the Jhon Durán explosion is due to happen, and he must be having such a great time.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. I mean, Durán, we better get the Durán conversation out of the way now, Lars. I mean, his status in the transfer market is such an interesting one, I think, because, of course, really exploded at Aston Villa, had some huge moments like the winner against Bayern Munich in the Champions League. And yet, I think it was pretty clear that Unai Emery, and by extension, Monchi and the club, ran out of patience with him relatively quickly. And of course, a lot of people at Villa not at all surprised when he left Al Nassr for Fenerbahce after a relatively short time as well. I mean, to me, he's very much a product of the modern transfer market. If you think he cost more in transfer fee for Al Nassr, and of course he's on loan from Al Nassr at the moment, and Fenerbahce are paying his whole Saudi wages, by the way, when we're talking about the money that exists in Turkish football at the moment, it's pretty remarkable, because I don't think any Premier League club would be doing that, for example. A thing that I find amazing about Jhon Durán is the fact that he cost more in transfer fee than either Victor Osimhen or Victor Gyökeres. And bear in mind that those are two, in terms of goal scorers, they're sure things. But that is the way the transfer market is now. Clubs would rather pay absolutely elite prices for players who have really high ceilings. Now, with Jhon Durán, I think it's a bit of a stretch to know whether he's going to hit that ceiling ever, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's a fair
on a consistent
analysis,
basis,
and I don't disagree with anything you've just said. But I would just add, I think I completely agree that there is a trend of paying more for consistency rather than take a chance on a player who might be of an age at a place in the age curve where he doesn't have the resale value that you want, all this sort of stuff. And in fact, this is something that I was droning on about for many years, and now it's become such a thing, this focusing on resale value, that I actually think they've kind of gone too far now. I think now actually there might be some value in taking a chance on the slightly older guys, because no one seems to be that keen on them. But I do also think in the specific case of Jhon Durán, his fee is the fee from Aston Villa to Al Nassr is inflated by the fact that you're dealing with a Saudi club. The transfer fee paid for Jhon Durán doesn't reflect a rational sort of valuation in terms of his qualities and his value in the market. It just reflects that the fact that the Saudis can throw money at things and they don't really care that they're overpaying. And also, he's now got a salary that makes it, if he wants to come back to Europe, which I guess I'm assuming that he wanted to play proper football again since he went to Turkey. His salary makes him tricky to deal with, because there's not that many clubs in Europe who are that keen on committing money to that kind of salary for a guy who, like you say, is not a sure thing, is still developing. So he is in an interesting spot. And I think following what he does in the Super League across this season will be very, very interesting. And this was, of course, we talk a lot about where we've gotten sidetracked back to the game. This was a huge game in the context of the season for Fenerbahce. Huge goal, I mean.
Yeah, and that's it. I think it sort of underlines what we already thought of Jhon Durán, doesn't it, though, as a big moment player rather than a consistent player. And this was a big moment to see. Now, talking of the transfer market and whacking taxes on for particular leagues, I dare say this is already happening with the Super League. Interesting, of course, that Archie Brown, the Englishman, ended up choosing to go to Fenerbahce instead of Milan in the end this summer. Archie Brown has globally been very, very good since he's arrived in Super League. Very eye-catching for Fenerbahce this season. Though, interestingly, when he was taken off right at the end of this game and right at the beginning of stoppage time, it was the guy who replaced him, Levent Mercan, who came on and put in that brilliant cross for Jhon Durán to nod in. And if you're Youssef En-Nesyri, who I think you could make an argument is, if not the best attacking header of the ball in the world, like pretty close. I mean, everything that he does, the way he connects with the ball, the timing of his jumps, all of it. We've seen it for Morocco and Sevilla as well. He is probably sitting there on the bench, having been booed off when he got substituted, thinking, well, why didn't I get any of those?
Yeah.
Because we talked about Jhon Durán being a moment player. Even if it's a really big blow to concede a goal like this in the 95th minute of a derby when you think you're home and hosed if you're Galatasaray, I dare say, Lars, that Galatasaray might be a little bit more pleased with the way that the game went. I mean, I think you can look at the raw numbers and say that, Fenerbahce had more possession, they had more shots, but Uyacan had a pretty quiet game in goal, and it felt that Galatasaray, as they often have in these derbies recently, played the occasion a lot better. So whereas I think you can say Fenerbahce played with purpose, Galatasaray played with a purpose, if you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I like that. And I think we've seen a few of those performances from Galatasaray this season where actually they have been a little bit more composed and defensively solid than we sometimes see from them. Speaking of raw numbers, I mean, they conceded almost nothing chance-wise in the first half. I mean, they took the lead early, and then, of course, with the game, they took the lead in the first half at least, and then the game state becomes that Fenerbahce are at home and they're trying to pile forwards and attack. And in the first half, Fenerbahce had just 4 shots. And it was only in the second half they were actually able to build some kind of pressure. But even then, there weren't that many clear-cut chances. And I think, I'm kind of looking at it's not like they've made massive personnel changes. They're still a very attack-minded team in terms of their setup, Galatasaray. But they do seem to have a little bit more structure and solidity to what they're doing this season.
Yeah, it all felt a bit frenetic from Fenerbahce, that they were so desperate to make it happen. Of course, they became, for the first time in their history, they had a season under Mourinho, of course, where they lost twice at home to Galatasaray last season. Bear in mind, there was that 20-year spell where Galatasaray never won at Sukru Saracoğlu, so it was a bit of a bogey ground for them. And they've had great success there in recent years. Obviously, that's one of those Mourinho records that he never talks about when he's getting out his long list of achievements that go way back. And when I mean way back, I mean way back. And it would have been, I think, from a morale standpoint, pretty disastrous for Fenerbahce if they'd have not managed to pick out this point. Not even talking about the gap in the league that would have been created. As we said, it's only 1 point, and it would have been 4 if Galatasaray had held on. But as you say, that sort of maturing of Galatasaray, and I think we can look at İlkay Gündoğan starting this game, and I thought maybe they left him on a little bit too long. He was flagging physically, and that definitely affected Fenerbahce's ability to monopolise the ball more, even if they weren't doing that much with it. And I guess the other part of that, Gabriel Sara, of course, formerly of Norwich, who I think has got better and better for them. Someone who, again, is really, really poised on the ball. And I guess when you look at their ability to sort of take the sting out of a game, it makes it even more amazing that they chucked away that Champions League chance against Union Saint-Gilloise last week, doesn't it?
That was very bizarre. Like, there was so much going on last week, I wasn't able to watch that game, and I genuinely don't understand what happened there, because the signs had been that after the signs had been like they had this really, really mature and impressive performance against Liverpool. They seem to have a little bit more structure. It isn't just Torreira being asked to be the only adult in the room in midfield. They've added like the strategic nous and know-how of Gundogan to that midfield. They've added Sarri in there. They're guys who are not completely YOLO at all times. So you'd think, with the sort of extreme talent that they have up front in Osimhen and Leroy Sané, with a slightly more composed midfield behind them, that this is a team that should, like, those kind of very manageable home games in the Champions League should be fine. And then suddenly it wasn't, which seems very typical for unfortunately very typical for Galatasaray in Europe, is that when you expect them to finally live up to the potential that they have, they just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a leopard trying to change its spots when you think of how Galatasaray have played in recent years, and you know the mentality of Turkish football. Really, that attack post Terim is something that I guess has held Turkish clubs back in European competition. Even if generally, obviously, it's been a very positive thing for Turkish football and the brand of Turkish football and the self-esteem of Turkish football. But I think that learning to be a bit more sensible is really important, and that really showed up in this game. I felt not just because of the way that they took the sting out of the crowd, they took the sting out of the occasion, they counter-attacked very intelligently and really had the better chances. But I think when you look at some of the injuries that Galatasaray have got at the moment, it really underlines the fact that Okan Buruk has got to a point where structure is king. Really, because you look at the starting lineup, they're playing Davinson Sanchez at right back, they're playing Mario Lemina at centre back at the moment. They're missing Wilfried Zingo, who to my mind is their best defender, and at left back you've got Kazimcan, who, when Sané scores, is hit in the face by something thrown from the crowd, so he already has a plaster and a wound below his eye. And actually, it's one of the things that turns the game at the end. At the very start of injury time, he smashes into Lucas Torreira. There's a clash of heads, and Torreira gets bandaged up. But Kazimcan, who's already had one smack on the head from the crowd, ends up being stretchered off. And they end up with Yunus Akgün, who really is a number 10/winger, at left back, which is not an ideal situation. That kind of disorganisation means that the brilliant ball in from Levent finds a fairly free Jhon Durán to score the equaliser. But I guess we want to talk about Leroy Sané a little bit, because we're talking about Durán being a guy who can seize big moments. It felt like after quite a slow start at Galatasaray, he's been excellent in recent weeks to my mind. We've always known Sané, Lars, has got the potential and got the ability to be one of the elite footballers in the world, like one of the top 25 or 50. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But we don't really see it that often, do we? And like today, not only did we see a fantastic opening goal, of course, deflection on it, but the way he dribbles round at Edson Alvarez and Skriniar to create the space was fantastic. But also, what we see, and we talked about this group defensive effort, is the fact that Sané is really useful off the ball, and he wasn't always that at Bayern, was he?
No, but this is something, I think it was Joshua Kimmich spoke about this in the last international break, that with Sané, it's all about where he is mentally, because he has this incredible physical capacity. And I think Kimmich actually pointed out, I'm pretty sure it was Kimmich, who pointed out that actually he has the physicality to both attack and defend, and to do it more than once a week, to put in a great shift in a pressing sense. Like, it's not his physical... It's the physicality is not what's limiting him. It's more a case of whether he's focused and whether he's in the right spot mentally. And it'll be intriguing to see, because going to Turkey is one of those things that there are some players who will see it as a step down. There are some players who will see it as sort of a good paycheck and a less demanding league, and they will maybe let their own standards slip a little bit. But there are also players who really take to it and really embrace the challenge and really show a strong side of themselves. And I think it's kind of early in the season to tell definitively which one of those categories Sané is going to fill in. But there have been glimpses that have been very, very positive recently. And that again is when we talk about Galatasaray being in their own sort of category, really. Even though Fenerbahce have managed to find the funds to bring someone like Jhon Durán in and cover his Saudi wages, there's a difference in star power there, really, between like the idea that you can have Osimhen and potentially Icardi as well in the box. I mean, tactically it's tricky to make both of them work, but I mean they'll try. You'll have games where you have both Osimhen and Icardi in the box, and you have Leroy Sané dribbling and putting in the crosses. Like, that's a level of star power that no one else is getting anywhere near in that league.
When we're talking about star power, I guess we have to talk about Marco Asensio as well, someone who's still in his 20s, someone who's still in his prime, someone we know has the ability to, if not be the best player in the league, one of the best players in the league, certainly. I mean, he was one of the best players in the Premier League for the second half of last season. With Aston Villa, he was absolutely outstanding and adapted better than even his biggest supporters really could have expected, I think it's fair to say. But having had, I think it's fair to say, an explosive interview with Marca over the weekend, which Luis Enrique didn't come out of that well, it's fair to say. Even though he tried to sidestep it, he sort of sidestepped it whilst, tripping over a few things littered on the floor. it was a bit of a stumble trip in there. Having said that, he didn't really deal with this occasion that well, and maybe it's the team, maybe it's the tactics, maybe it's what Domenico Tedesco had them doing today. But it didn't feel to me like Asensio was ever in position to really bring his talent to bear on this game.
Yeah, and but Tedesco is not a freewheeling sort of super attacking manager either, which is kind of, and that disappointed me a little bit when they got rid of Mourinho. They moved on from Mourinho. You're kind of hoping they would pivot to someone who can add a bit of swaz to proceedings, and that's maybe never really been Tedesco's game.
No,
but of course, as you say, they are undefeated. So maybe under Tedesco so far, I mean, they've got nine wins, 5 draws, and 0 defeats so far. Can I be honest? That's the kind of numbers you were kind of expecting the Mourinho to get out of them. This is kind of what we were expecting to see under the special one. But it's happening under, and I think it's kind of, maybe that's something that works for them. I mean, they are only 1 point behind Galatasaray, but as a neutral, you would maybe want to see even more adventure.
Yeah, you would. I mean, look, to me, it's quite simple. Asensio needs to get the keys to the team. Although conversely, I suppose you could say that was really Fenerbahce's problem. They were waiting for that big contribution. It was either going to be a set piece, blunt instrument moment from, say, Skriniar from a corner, or it's going to be Talisca pulling something out of the bag, Jhon Durán pulling something out of the bag, Asensio pulling something out of the bag. And I don't know about you. I feel a little bit disappointed that I'm a great lover of Turkish football, and I'm not at all disappointed that he's playing in the Super League. But given how good he was in the Premier League, I am a little bit disappointed that he ended up at Fenerbahce, when clearly it was a money thing that Villa couldn't hold on to him, because why wouldn't you want to keep him? He was so good there last season. And for me, I think dealing with a game like this is not just about the talent you've got. It's about finding a way to deal with the occasion, to deal with the tempo. And I don't just mean the tempo in terms of breakneck speed. Sometimes it's the opposite. Fred talked in his interview afterwards on beIN Sport about how he felt that Galatasaray were running the clock all the time. And to me, it felt like they were just playing an intelligent away match. But it's interesting, maybe again, he's a player who was in England for quite a long time. It felt to him as if they were like just playing the ref, which I would argue is very much part of the game in the Super League. But to really rise above when there's that lack of fluency, maybe that's something that Asensio has to get used to.
Yeah, no, that's possible. That's entirely possible. Like, really, the game itself was maybe not as explosive and as wild as maybe we were hoping, and it's yeah. And I think some of the credit, I mean, we're going over ground that's already been covered, but I think some of the credit does go to Galatasaray for going away, going across the Bosphorus, and getting into that situation where you're taking an early lead and you have that to ride on, but having a lot of structure in the team and being less chaotic, and Fenerbahce not really managing to carve them open and not offering quite enough. I mean, but the highlights package from this game will not be life-changing, but what you should check out is the video that they put up on beIN Sport Turkey on YouTube of the pre-match shenanigans, because there was some tremendous tifo. It's a good light show as well. Tell you what, Andy, I was thinking that the other day. I am sort of like a grumpy old man who thinks all sort of newfangled things in football, a lot of them are bad and they annoy me. I have to say, I don't mind a light show. Show. Quite like a light show before the game. It's kind of good. I feel like it's atmospheric, Andy.
Is that what saw you through Tottenham Fulham at the weekend?
It was the highlight of the game, I would say. The highlight of going to Spurs Fulham for me was definitely the pre-match light show. Kudus' goal, to be fair, was good. But now, off track. But really, it's worth checking out because you get a real sense of just how incredible the atmosphere is. And again, circling back to where I kind of started this conversation, if you're a Jhon Durán and you already have all the money you're ever going to need in your life, why would you not want to play in this environment rather than somewhere like Saudi Arabia? You know, it seems incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's easy to be critical of players who kiss the badge and all that sort of stuff, but when Durán was doing it at the end, he was obviously just so taken out of himself by the moment. And, you know, just the sheer joy of it. You saw him standing on the advertising hoardings with his arms aloft, and you thought, yeah, that must really feel fantastic, because you know I think he lives to really bend a game to his will, and hopefully for him and hopefully for world football, he finds a way to do that consistently. I'm not completely sold on the idea that he will, and fitness is certainly part of that. But I guess, like, if we were looking at the rest of the Super League season, I mean, I think it's very hard to criticise what Domenico Tedesco has done so far. I mean, he's kept Fenerbahce in touch with a very, very good Galatasaray side. And I would argue in the past 3 to 4 weeks, Fenerbahce have played much better. They've played much more fluently. And Galatasaray have stumbled a bit. They've won one of the last 4 in the Super League now after that late equaliser. And even the victory last time out, the home game, the 3-2 against Jhon Durán, I thought, honestly, they were rotten in the first half, and it took a real İlkay Gündoğan and Mauro Icardi rolling back the years sort of effort to get them to win that game. I mean, does this game change your thoughts on who the favourites are for the Super League and who might win the Super League? Because for me, despite the concession of that late equaliser, I still feel there's a gap between how Galatasaray, even with their recent wobble, can handle the big moments. Whereas I think you're just waiting for individuals to pull a rabbit out of a hat a little bit for Fenerbahce sometimes.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And I think, really, I think it was important for Fenerbahce to get it, not just to get a point, but to deny Galatasaray the extra 2 points, to not let them open up a little bit of a window. I think that was the key thing here. And I do think there's still a bit of a work in progress under Tedesco, and I would like to see them, you know, become more coherent, all this sort of things. But it would have been demoralising, right? It would have been demoralising if Galatasaray goes to your place and takes the 3 points and you don't even score a goal like that. That would have been, and that's the kind of thing that can turn the atmosphere a little bit. Now they go out of it thinking, yeah, we're still undefeated, we're 1 point behind them, we're still very much in this. I mean, you'd still make Galatasaray favourites, but I think it was a really important point and a really important moment.
Well, thank you, Lars, and thank you for listening to On the Continent. I'll be back in the studio with Dotton and Jonathan Johnson this Thursday.
Ooh.
In the
JJ
meantime,
in the house.
Yes, we will have a nice time. There's no doubt about it. Hint, hint, hint.
Yes.
In the meantime, make sure to subscribe in your podcast app or on YouTube so that you never miss an episode.